Developmental movement is the movement that naturally occurs in all humans and in fact in all animals as we develop toward maturity. We have an internal blueprint that we're following. All mammals have a very, very similar internal blueprint. It looks different because of our gestational periods. So a colt will get up and walk within, an hour of its birth, whereas a child takes the whole first year to learn to walk. Internally, it's the same neurological pathways. We all need to learn to push with our heads, to push with our pelvic floors, to push with our hands and feet, to reach with our heads and all of the other parts. And then we put that together in this universal manner that moves us from crawling on our bellies, crawling on our knees, to standing and walking.
Paramount to me that the parents really learn about the importance of movement development. Every movement the child does corresponds to some connection that's made in the brain, and every movement, every little thing a child does is a foundation for the next level of movement and development to come.
So even in the womb, even as our bodies are forming, we have fluid patterns, we have movements of fluid, and then after we're born, or even before we're born, once we have a skeleton, then there are the vertebrae patterns. And most of us are familiar with how when a baby's born, it is only capable of doing certain movements. And eventually the baby learns to lift its head and to roll over and eventually push up with its arms. And each one of these patterns is correlated with a certain level of the senses and perceptions, and also the connection and integration of movement with a different level in the brain. So it's a fundamental part of our development as human beings, and how we see the world and how we are embodied in our bodies.
I specialize in something called developmental movement therapy, which means that my work has a basis in neuromotor processes. How, as infants, we learn to move, and even in utero, how we learn to move, and how those movement patterns actually inform our older childhood as well as our adulthood.
When a baby is born, when you meet a newborn, you know the movement vocabulary that they have because they move in the same way. They're moving against gravity, it's more difficult, but on your body you can feel all where they're initiating, how it's traveling through. In water you can see what their movement was. And all of the pre-movements have already been present. And so if you don't see a movement in a baby, there's some movement limitation, then to look to see, is it a movement limitation that is a birthing issue? Is it a position in the womb? So a lot of the things that we're doing with the infant development is not something that impacts their life greatly as far as do they walk, talk, work, play. It affects the ability with which they're able to do it and the sense of their own body.
Very apparent that people generally know about what we call the milestones, like rolling, sitting, crawling, and walking, but very few people know anything about the whole process of of how to get there.
Developmental movement is not a mechanical thing. Developmental movement is a process through which we're learning to move, we're learning to relate to the environment, and we're establishing our basic psychological patterns of self and other and relationship. So these 5 fundamental actions are a way of viewing all of this. Yield, which is very close to relaxation. Push, reach, grasp, and pull. I put them in a circle, so always after the pull, there's another yield again, so we can take in what we've pulled. They're happening all the time. By yielding, we learn to soften, to digest, to receive, to show up in vulnerability. By pushing, we learn to establish a sense of self, a sense of self-support, a sense of assertion, a sense of existing enough to communicate to another. Through reaching, we express our natural curiosity about the world, about each other, and our natural desire for relationship. By grasping, we choose to bring some of that outer world into ourselves. I want that for me. By yielding again, we actually grow our sense of self. We take in and receive and let something integrate and become part of us.
The phrase developmental movement has been around for a long time. It's movement based on the development of movement. final homologous, homolateral, and contralateral movement.
So we go through those different stages of movement development. We look at the children, we do the movements that the children are doing, and that way we also understand how the children are working and how those connections are being made. And we say that the movement are the way that the child learns to think. But the hands touch, the brain understands.
distinctions I'm making is between the pre-locomotion baby in the first 6 months and the locomotion baby in the second half of the first year. In making that distinction, I think it helps parents learn more clearly about their baby in the beginning in their movement is just in a contained space, really within the reach of their arms and legs, lying on all four sides, on their back, on each side, and on their front. Whereas the locomotion stage now, they're changing level and they're moving through space and coming to standing and walking.
Primitive reflexes are very important in development. We call them the building blocks of movement, and they are things that get our hands and feet to move. There's the shaping of the hand, the ability to take hold and grasp, the ability to let go, the ability to differentiate the thumb and the finger. So babies' hand and foot movement, the feet will do the same thing. The toes will fan, the big toe will curl up and the little toes down. All of that motoring of the hands and feet allows perception of the world. It also is very essential because there's so many bones in the hands and the feet compared to the legs that we're getting micro communication. And we want all this communication, especially under the feet for weight bearing and shifting surfaces. So there's hands and feet reflexes, full limb, being able to extend and push out, being able to come in. And then there's the head on the body, things that allow the baby to turn and, orient to the middle of the body, the midline, helps their later processing for reading, for learning. So we call this, in some ways, sensory processing. And reflexes are the underpinning of sensory processing because it's I sense something and I respond. Being on the tummy allows the baby to measure. It's not just getting its sense of self by pushing against gravity, but it's also learning to orient with the eyes and to be able to measure with its limbs how far away is that object and how do I get it to my mouth, and what's the difference when I curl in what we call hand to mouth or I come out. These are essential primitive reflexes that are the building blocks. They're the alphabet of movement that allows the infant then to have later brain development for crawling. The best position is to really support that flexor tone, which is the curling in. The actual spinal curve doesn't complete its formation until 6 months to that first year. And so the curling of the spine is actually very supportive for the infant.
First of all, they come up, they begin to come up from the earth. On their belly, they're gaining their physical strength. On the back, they're gaining their perceptual awareness of other. Here it's awareness of me. Here it's awareness of you. And how the side is kind of the place of meeting of those.
Now, at 4 months, we already have babies comfortable on their tummy in purposeful play, and they can roll from their back to their side to their tummies by themselves. Engaging in some sort of hand-to-hand interaction with a toy or just with their hands. You know, they like looking at their hands, so they're getting a lot of head flexion and chin, tucking their chin flexion, that is giving them a lot of anti-gravity control in looking down at their hands. And we can see what babies are doing. By the end of 4 months, they're already shifting their weight from one side to the other. At 5 months, which I think is just an amazing time, babies are lying on their side, playing. They're separating their legs from each other. They're separating their arms from each other. So we can already see the precursor of crawling on their belly and cross-lateral walking. But first they have to be able to do this in relationship to gravity.
Once they can begin to move up, then they move across, and that's where they're developing all this deep musculature, this core. And if you stand them, they're not going to develop that. Or you sit them, then they're going to actually pull out of it.
Lying on their side, you may see a baby lifting their head up, laterally flexing, which also helps when they're rolling over, that they can lift their head and right their head against gravity.
Side lying is really important. Side lying. And this is from babies who are having more difficulty. If you put them on their back, they're going to be extended. And if you put them on their belly, they're going to be too flexed. This is a baby there have been some major trauma or more trauma. And so on the sides, their tone is more balanced. And so they can begin to have midline. But the tone is more balanced on the side.
In the pre-locomotion stage, when parents are interacting with their baby, I really encourage them to be down at their baby's level. And at their baby's level, they can position their body in such a way as to encourage their baby's movement. Nina. In a 5-month-old baby, if the baby isn't rolling to the side, to each side, then by positioning their body to one side would encourage their baby to roll.
Good girl. Good girl.
Parents can have a wonderful, encouraging influence on their babies depending on where they position their body in relationship to their baby. So if a parent wants to engage their baby in tummy time, a really nice way that I've shown is for babies to lie on their parent's body. So they can, vocalize and hum and vocalize vowels.
How are you doing? Oh, uh-huh.
And this can be really, really soothing for the baby.
Oh.
Where are we going? Where are we going?
Yeah.
Tummy time isn't just putting the baby flat on the ground and then lifting them up. It's being in relationship to the baby.
What I like to say for the locomotion baby, that creeping is a 6-month mastery program.
Or we usually use both limbs together first. You're just stronger, more capable. So both arms together and both legs together. Then the next stage in progression is to kind of experience one arm progressing through to that side. So I get to know my right side and pushing down through my other side. Then I can do that with my leg. And I'm mostly doing this down on the floor like a little amphibian lizard crawl. Of course, people know roll, crawl, stand, walk, but we don't actually know that there's crawling on the belly before creeping or crawling on all fours, and that there are aspects within that where you can look at the strength of the arms with that, the strength of the legs, the use of the two sides of the body.
Brain development related to crawling is very important in that lifting of the head, eventually the head is coming to vertical. But all of the parts of the brain we need that help us process experience are not way up here, where analysis lives in this prefrontal cortex. So we need the ability to have our body adjust itself, take good breath, and not think about it. So crawling really builds a resource capacity in the brainstem, the cerebellum, the ability to come up through the pons. These are all terms for brain areas.
Some questions, of course, I get asked by parents is, does it matter if my baby is creeping on hands and knees? And again, depending on what country, you're going to be calling it crawling. Well, I'll just say creeping on hands and knees in a cross-lateral pattern or contralateral pattern. And I would say yes, absolutely, and it really makes a difference how the baby is creeping and that they are moving on hands and knees. First of all, begin changing levels, and then they go into independent sitting, and then they begin moving through space in a cross-lateral pattern. But there's much more. It's simultaneous in the beginning, there's rhythm, there's timing. You know, all of these things, a smoothness that comes in near the end of the first year in the interaction, also from creeping to going back down onto their belly to a lower level, coming to a higher level, changing over to another sitting pattern. All of these things where the cross-lateral creeping is integrated into other movements that the baby is doing. And so I don't think parents would think like that. They think more that it's something, oh, my baby will do it for a short period of time, and because they're not doing it, it really doesn't matter. But yes, it does matter perceptually how the baby is perceiving the environment and their play interactions.
Each level, crawling in particular, is great for a baby because it's a time when they can really move into space, and they can move into space and see space. Their perceptions are free, and they're not necessarily stuck to the floor. They can just see, and their heads are free to turn like a tiger running through the jungle.
All of these patterns are affecting where the baby is looking. In the lateral or homolateral pattern, right, the baby is kind of scanning the environment. But in cross-lateral creeping, it's more three-dimensional, and it's wonderful the input they're getting visually, their visual movement processing.
finally, I would say for parents, low to the ground. Staying low to the ground yourself if possible, changing up the furniture in your house so things are low while a baby's in low development. Taking the time for the baby to learn to get up rather than get up too quickly will make a world of difference for their brain and for their ability to be ready for school.
When we allow children to sequence or follow their own sequence and be met by the caregivers around them, they have a sense of self that they're okay right where they are because they're being met by the environment. They're being met by others.
And if they're used to being down on the floor, then in the locomotion stage, when their baby is creeping and exploring space and levels, they will also spontaneously interact with them. You know, maybe they'll take part in a chase and catch game. Maybe they'll go into all fours and the baby can creep underneath their body. Something where they begin to really feel comfortable in their body with their baby and movement and play.
In other words, instead of always bringing the baby up to the level of the adult, can the adult go down to the level of the child and meet the child right where they are and give them the sense that they're okay right where they are?
Originally, I was teaching a mums and tots class and children's creative dance classes and adult classes. And I realized in watching the children that they had great difficulty with coordination, with their movement, maybe it was disorganized. And that took me into studying the developmental movement patterns and really looking more closely at how to repattern inefficient movement patterns in babies, children, and adults.
In infant development, we're looking at, we use the word repatterning. What does that mean? It means allowing a pattern to find the ease, allowing there to be a supportive pathway, which is what a pattern is. And there can be patterns that are already set based on birth, based on early handling, based on being placed only on the back, that there's little gaps in the full functioning of the rotation ability, the processing ability. So repatterning, we use touch and we use movement.
There is just this universal principle in body-mind centering, and probably in many other methods as well, which is that support precedes movement. And whenever there's a pattern that is not as strong or that we're wanting to support the development of, instead of practicing that pattern, we go to an earlier pattern. So if a baby is not reaching, it probably means that they haven't developed the sense of yield and push. Because yield and push is the pattern that enables the baby to find themselves, to feel where their body begins and ends, and to start to embody that. Without that reaching, there's nothing to support the reaching. Crawling, and I would just say just all the developmental movements on the floor, whether it's lying on their sides or on their bellies or crawling on their bellies, are all so important. Each step is essential for developing the movements that will support eventually walking. For example, the integration of the hands, pushing with the hands, the integration of being able to lift the head, the integration of being able, all of the reflexes that are developed at each level in space. So Ella, the one-year-old child we work with this morning, was such a delightful, curious, playful child. Wanted to play as soon as she got here. And she had this pattern of what we'd call a scooch, which is pushing with one leg, and it would be like crawling except for stepping on one foot and dragging the other leg behind. I decided, instead of working on the crawling, to go back to an earlier pattern, which is the use of both legs homologous, pushing, extending, and flexing. Curiosity. And then going into shifting from one side to the other, which would be going to the homolateral. And to just support her feeling both legs and moving them together. Wow, what have we got? And also there's a sense of working more into what we call the sagittal space, which is like just moving forward. And when going into the side sitting, which we're working on, sitting down on one cheek, hip bone or the other, one sitting bone or the other, we'll encourage going into spiraling, which will take her also into the horizontal plane, which will open up other possibilities for her movement. Oh, all right, did you see that?
No, I
How she just got up there? That was, she pushed off and she used the left leg.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Once they have that, then they have the security to, with joy, go into a movement. Hello. Hello.
As part of the work as a developmental movement therapist, we are looking at how neurodevelopmental processes proceed in a normal progression. And yet everybody in life has something that's a little abnormal. That's part of life. It's part of our adventure in living.
Oh, here they come. We're coming. We might want to make an opening for them, or let. I found somebody's toys. We can put out some mats for you. Hi. Hi, Leo.
Because they think something's a little off. Maybe they have a second child. Maybe they're comparing them to a cousin.
How about this one? You gonna trade?
The child's not using one leg a little bit, or the head's a little sluggish, or they're not responding to sound, or they're not sucking well and eating. And so what we do is just allow them to play. It's part of the model of my own training program, the program I developed called Dynamic Embodiment. We just observe the children and look at how they're progressing within their own, quote, milestones.
So anything you've been kind of playing with or curious about? Or?
Trying to pull himself up and stand quite early. And I think that was a bit of a surprise to me. My first child is very different. Yeah.
You were wanting to stand up, and your balance was just working itself out. You going to show us now?
I think so. We were just talking about it.
Yeah.
When parents come into my center, either individually with one child or as part of a play group, there are such a variety of reasons they're coming. Some are doing well baby checks, like I'm just having a great time with my baby and I want to learn more and I want to understand this process of developmental movement.
Just getting the toes to fan out helps to bring the leg into alignment. So this is very nice because he's feeling that outer blade there. I just kind of wrecked it because he withdrew away. Sometimes when you stroke, it'll bring a fanning out. It happened later. His first tendency is to go away, but now it's, let's see, there it's fanning out. Is that okay? So he's negotiating that. He's figuring out, do I want to go towards your touch or do I want to stay away? There you go.
It's part of the whole buzz around brain-based learning and Mozart in the brain and just really understanding more and more that movement does have an impact in development, including future learning patterns as well as present-day movement patterns. That's feeling your leg right under you. Other parents are coming in because they have an intuition something's off, and others are coming in because they've been given a diagnosis that they are pursuing some kind of support around. I'm just tickling your hip joint. Yeah, oh yeah, you got the mouth.
He likes to reach up, right? So his brother is older, so he always wants to get where everything.
He wasn't holding on to.
And he's not finding his, like he's not sitting at all. He doesn't want to sit.
And that will come after this. Okay? This is great. If you can let him crawl on hands and knees, we call it creeping.
Yes.
First, and then find seating. That'll be fine. The thing is, I actually want to know if he ever, that is so great. That is so great. I want to do that too. Did he ever push with his toes?
No.
That's...
He's like...
Yeah. So I almost don't want him to crawl yet. I want him to get that little push of the toes first. That's why I was tickling his feet.
Okay.
Okay? All right. So I'm just finding ways to make contact with his feet, just to find out where he's willing to find. So he's using the top of his foot. And sometimes we need to connect hip to foot. So that'll bring him to sitting. So I'm tickling, he's there. You're in flexion. Now if you push from there, that was it. You did it. And that goes right into the nervous system right away. Both. Yeah. That's it. Are they coming to sitting? Have they done what we call symmetrical movement? Can they use the right and left side equally? And with that, I'm able to then notice where certain patterns may have been skipped or left out. Okay, so his head can come down as the object. Yeah. Goes down. So I'm using gravity to my advantage. So there's, I gotcha. I gotcha. Ooh, you used your arm well. You see that? Just allow. Then he wants to go back to this, but then just so just hanging out here a little bit. So why we're doing some of this support for movement is to also is to bring in movement coordination and efficiency and performance, but it's also to stimulate parts of the brain. Yeah. So the more you let this go a little, bud, the more you let that go. We go from here to here in crawling. So he's really here. And the more he gets a little more under, he can get a little more leverage. Yeah, that's it. You're using it. But how about forward? How about forward? Yeah. And many kids these days don't get the push from the leg, and they just start pulling with their arms. So one of the things that might happen in the baby group is to teach parents to support use of the hand on the foot so they have something to push off of. You just did that. I'm helping under his belly, just take the little bit of the weight off. So this hand is just taking a little weight off. And I'm waiting for him to get a sense that his push can go through his legs rather than just be a gesture. What would it be like to go? Yeah, you just did that. One of the reasons we do this is because we have a theory that's based in early child study that happened at the Yale Child Study Center in New Haven, Connecticut, in the US, that the use of movement is a stimulus to the development of the brain. How about resting? How about just resting? Wow.
You see already the homolateral pattern.
When I first saw Bonnie working with babies, it was at an introductory workshop, I was just astonished. You know, I just knew babies in the context of my family or my friends' babies, and how I just looked at them as kind of young human beings. And when I started to understand what was actually happening inside babies, I was so moved and what they were experiencing. And I suddenly realized that part of the reason that I was so moved was because I began to understand that there were a lot of neurological patterns that I myself had not integrated. And through doing the work with Bonnie, I went through quite a lot of transformation, and I would have to say healing.
Bonnie Bainbridge-Cohen, the founder of Body Mind Centering, is one of the two most important teachers in my life.
What would you like?
Her ability to perceive the microscopic elements of human physiology and experience, I think, are unprecedented in history, as far as I know.
Here to find it.
And then her ability to teach us to perceive that. And it's permeated out into the culture in an extraordinary way.
So we're looking for comfort and safety.
And now is, throughout the movement world, in the yoga world, in the dance world, people understand how physiology and inner gesture naturally sequences out into outer gesture.
Thumb is here, and then it comes here, and then it starts to come around. It takes a year for it to come fully around from here.
What Bonnie gave us in the area of child development is a template for understanding all of human development throughout the lifespan. She put early motor reflexes and early movement development together in a way that we can see how movement, the nervous system, relationship are all evolving together based on both our internal blueprint and the experiences we have around us.
Just touch. The question for me is, how do I, and therefore you decide how you, help the child, the baby, to experience their fullest potential as who they are. So how old are you?
I will be 1 on May 16th.
And you are?
I'm Aurora, and I take care of Bodhi 3 days a week. You go for it. Okay. You can do it. You can do it.
Are you okay to go today?
Yeah, it's fine.
And when you're going to go down, you just have to bend your knees. Otherwise, you can't go down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With Bodhi, when I brought his leg forward, if he accepted it, then he would start pushing off of it. But he didn't. So then I know, okay, I'm not into the right direction for me. So then I go, okay, well, what is it that would encourage that? And so then they teach me, okay, you have to do something else. You have to be more creative here. You can't just put me into posture. But in their case, well, okay, well, how do you help them so that they will do that themselves? And that's why I brought out that bright paper, that Mylar, because it's stimulating, and otherwise he would have just watched us the whole time to see what we were going to do instead of, and I wanted to engage. First of all, we've just met, so I don't know you from before. Mm-hmm. But if you nap 2 hours twice a day, that's a very quiet being, and that's great. A lot of us would like to be able to be that quiet. On the other hand, how to help him reach out and to begin to crawl and want to go movement-wise into the world, as well as perceptual. You are. So I'm noticing that he's not so active here. So what I, here we go. There we go. Yeah. Kiki. And wanting something to give feedback, so the scarf gives feedback to the movement. Yeah. That would be helpful. Yeah. So if the mylar was smaller piece, I might do that, so that he has both hands and feet making noise. This isn't making noise, it's not giving him so much feedback. So maybe if I tighten it so that it gets more proprioceptive feedback. When I studied with Marion Chase back in the early 60s, she said that when she started working as a dancer with patients from St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C., that the psychiatrist said they improved so much from taking her classes, and she became one of the founders of dance therapy. She said that if a person was catatonic and she could get them to move in their pelvis, they would begin to speak. So that's going back for me more than 50 years of that, her teaching. And I found that that's very interesting, because if you noticed Bodhi, once he started, he wasn't catatonic, I'm not relating him to that, but once he really got energy in here, he became more vocal. And he is vocal because Aurora said he is vocal, so it's not that he doesn't have that. Anyway, so the babies teach us how to help them discover themselves, at the same time not to take it away and discover it for them, but to give them a reflection and an experience that reflects back to them their own capabilities. Great, yeah. Oh.
It's hard to imagine he couldn't crawl, Bonnie. Now he's like the expert crawler.
Beat me.
And he's so fast.
Also getting really moving.
He's like
good.
I mean, I think there's no such thing as a perfectly developed baby or human being. I think we all had the development we had, and the miraculous thing about us as human beings is we have this tremendous capacity to adapt, and I think that's what makes us interesting. All the varieties of what human beings do.
It's very exciting. If we would look at the babies, what are they teaching us, instead of that we have to do something to them? Because they're actually teaching us, and we're responding, and it's equal. Another thing which some babies like, and some babies, it's very important for him. I don't see it so much, but if they throw their head back a lot, so this baby just threw a head back, he said, I actually flipped the baby, and then come back like this. So I don't say, okay, time to flip. It's like the baby initiates the flip. And we go around, and they come around. Okay, so you take him to you.
okay.
Your face, talk to him.
Hi, Kelly. Is that like a big smile? Is that like a big smile?